So thanks again for coming tonight. I know it's like dinner hour. So for some families, otherwise known as the bewitching hour, right? So I'm Maria Martin, principal at Bacich, and I have with me today a few other people to introduce. So Anne-Marie Skaggs, assistant principal here at Bacich, and Raquel Rose, superintendent. Hi. We also have David Riedel in attendance. He is president of the board, the school board. Do you have any other board members? Okay, maybe on Zoom. Okay, so we're here tonight in this third grade parent meeting. Why is it not going to the next screen?
Press your space bar.
No, it's just making a noise. There we go. This one? Okay. So the meeting purpose and objectives for tonight is to provide information to you parents, especially third grade parents, about the planning process for next school year, and consider feedback sorry, that's the wrong date, 23-24 school year, and consider feedback regarding current third grade class in an effort to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of all our Bacich students. And I just want to emphasize, we're obviously we're tasked with the privilege of working with all 550 students. So even though this is a parent meeting for third grade, we are thinking of all of our students when we're planning. Okay.
So this slide, we wanted to highlight it because we feel like this is a slide that I use at board meetings, at our LCAP meetings, at various board committee meetings that we have, and it just speaks to our strategic plan as a school district. Over on the right-hand side is identifying our core beliefs related to recognizing we're a diverse community. We want to embrace that. We want to inspire our learners. We want to inspire our educators. We want to inspire our families to stay connected with our schools. And then that leads right into this notion around connection and community. And the interest there is just that we recognize that the way we are successful is through our interconnectivity. And so really being able to have the opportunity to engage with one another, hear the feedback. There are going to be times where we completely agree and decide on something that we all get to do and move forward together. And then there's going to be times where we may not always agree, but our hope is that as a system that we can work together, be able to have that dialogue and recognize that we all want what's best for children. And so those core beliefs lead into our 4 key goals, one being that we want to acknowledge that we want to meet the needs of every one of our learners, whether those are children that need to be more challenged, those are children that might need a little bit more support, but that we are offering a system and an educational experience that meets each and every child, that we're supporting our staff. And so we're offering them the professional development, we're giving a competitive salary, and we're setting up an environment that they really find joyous and that they want to be a part of. That we're maintaining fiscal solvency. And so this is one of the primary roles of our board, is that they maintain a budget that is not only can support us for our current year that we're in, but also 2 subsequent years. And so we have certain mandates by the state that we have to maintain. And so consistently looking at those projections and being sure that we're staying within the bounds that we need to. And last but not least is community. And this goes back to that notion of connection and just how important we believe that those community connections are vital to making sure that we can do all that we can on behalf of the children that we get to serve.
Well, so the next slide is kind of the basic version of the previous slide. So we have what's called a Bacich school plan for student achievement, otherwise known as a SIPSA, because in education, we have acronyms for everything. And that kind of is our roadmap often of each year for how we make decisions and where we go. So I just captured highlights of the 4 goals that we have in the current SIPSA, which are around math proficiency for all students, reading proficiency, community, and staying true to our core values. And as part of our work around core values this year, we, a team of teachers, developed and created and wrote the Bacich Promise, which is here, and I will read it to you now. On the marshland's edge, I strive to be my best, while in my future I invest. I promise to include and inspire, accept and applaud, care and share. I'm a dreamer, I'm a doer, and I'm proud to be a Bacich Bear. So I just wanted to keep that front and center for all of us tonight. So next, I want to share with you some math growth academic data. Although I am focused on the current third grade, I do have some comparative data as well. So this slide shows you just two columns. All of the students, the green column represents students who achieved average, high, and high on the most recent winter, the winter assessment for math growth. And the pink is the percentage of students who scored in the low, average, and low. So obviously we want these numbers in the green to be really high, and we want the numbers in the pink to be 0. But this compares the current third grade, how they did at so the top row is how they did just this recent winter administration of the test. And compared to them, how this same cohort of students did in when they were in second grade in the winter. So you'll see in math, there's a little slippage, which I'll show you on another slide when we talk about just comparing them to the fourth graders. It's not unusual, especially in math, because the math skills and concepts do get more challenging. And so students who might have been in second grade might have eked out an average. They might have slipped, a few of those students slipped into the low average in math. And then reading, this is also a typical trend where you do see some growth from second grade to third grade in terms of the number of the percentage of students who are in that green area. So those are your third grade students. So the next slide is the comparison between the current third grade and the current fourth grade. So you can see that the fourth grade cohort is a little stronger in terms of the percentage of students in fourth grade who are in that green column, both for math and for reading. The differential in reading is about 10 percentage points and about 7 for math. So then I thought, well, let's take a look at how our fourth graders did when they were in third grade to just kind of see their trajectory. So that's what this slide is. So as a whole, that cohort of students is a little bit stronger. And we see that that's not atypical in education. And they had the same trends in terms of from third grade to fourth grade, a little slippage in math, and from third grade to fourth grade, a little bit of gains there in reading. So similar to the third grade cohort data. Another data point that we use is the Fontes and Pinnell reading assessments that are given to our students. So these are the winter results. So we have 4 columns here. So the very far, the green column are the number of students who scored at or above the winter grade level benchmark for that particular reading assessment. And we have 77 students there. Approaching, we have 19 students. And so we really differentiate between approaching, below, and far below in terms of matching students up to what they need to move forward. And it's a very different type of intervention that approaching students might need compared to, for example, students who are far below. These 3 students need much more intensive work in reading than these 19 students. So we're also wanting to think about how are our students doing behaviorally. There's been a lot of talk recently and some concerns around behavior. And so I pulled some behavior infraction data. And this includes behavior management cards. It also includes other infractions that we administrators might log for a variety of reasons. So it's not only behavior management cards. So what this slide is, so the current second graders, this year through March 24th, when I pulled it, the current second graders there are 19 behavior infractions that have risen to the point where they're logged into our system. And that same group of kids, when they were in first grade, there were only 3. And I found that to be pretty interesting, but one of the things that we really look at is the age and development of students when we think of their behavior. And so when you're looking at a first grade student who's pushing, it's very different than when you're looking at a 3rd or 4th grade student who's pushing. And so your kids, the 3rd graders, are here. So through March, there are 28 logged behavior infractions compared to 32 for last school year. So they're probably on pace to meet or exceed that 32 number. We have a little bit more school to go. We'll see, but maybe not. Maybe we'll hold strong at 28. And then just some comparison to 4th grade. So the current 4th grade for the current year is really close to 3rd in terms of behavior infractions. They had fewer last year when they were in 3rd grade. And another point of difference is there's a different administration, and not that we're like, extreme disciplinarians, but one of the goals that Anne-Marie and I have had this year is really around parent communication with respect to behavior. And so if we're reaching out to you to send you an email, to make a phone call, to invite you in for a meeting, that's going to show up in these numbers here. And we've really made an effort to increase that. And these numbers here represent a different administration that may have had a different approach to that communication piece. And raise up.
All right. So hot off the press, we have some youth truth data to share with you. And so I'm going to give you kind of an overview of how you're going to read this. So the blue column will be Bacich as a whole, but really that's just 3rd and 4th graders that take the survey. The green column will be your 3rd graders. The orange column is a typical youth truth school. And the yellow column is a typical California school. So you'll see that comparative data throughout everything that I'm sharing. So there are 6 core areas that they survey your children on. The first one is on engagement, and it has to do with their engagement with school and education. The second is with an academic challenge, and this is the degree to which school is challenging and relevant. So you can see where your 3rd graders lie compared to typical California and youth truth schools. And then in relationships, this has to do with the relationship with their teacher. Strong relationships here in 3rd grade. Next, we have culture. And culture has to do with the classroom environment. So in the spirit of true transparency, we do see that we have some areas that we have to work on. Instructional methods has to do with strategies and approaches used in class. And then belonging has to do with feeling welcome at their school. Okay, so those were the overalls. And then we also wanted to highlight a couple questions, specific questions that were asked of your students. So the first one is, do students behave in class? And for the most part, our 3rd graders say that 95% do. These are percent positives. So when they survey the students, there's a hardly never, sometimes, and then always. So the way that Youth Truth shares that data is a percent positive. They fall into the sometimes and the always category. So 95% say that students behave in class, and you can see comparative to other schools, pretty good. Then are students friendly to you? Again, we are showing strength in this area compared to, I mean, it's very similar though to typical Youth Truth in California schools. And then, do you feel safe at school? Here we have a little bit of a dip in third grade, but comparatively, if we were to include our fourth graders, then we exceed a typical youth truth in California school. So those were just some areas that we wanted to highlight.
And real quick,
Yeah.
the blue line that's there,
Mhm.
is that third and fourth? grade
Third and
combined?
fourth together.
Okay.
So there were some areas where fourth grade was stronger and third grade wasn't, and then vice versa as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so the positive means that for students that said, I sometimes feel safe at school, that was the
Mhm.
reason for the positive, and we
Mhm.
don't know the difference between.
Yeah.
sometimes and-
It's really difficult. They don't move to the 5-choice question until they move up to middle school. I think 6th grade is when they have the 5 choices. But in elementary, it's just those 3 choices, and generally they find that when a student feels that it's not like always, they typically choose the sometimes. Sometimes doesn't sound like that strong of a word, but they know it's definitely not a never, right? But it might not be always, it's always happening, so that's when it falls into that kind of gray area of sometimes.
You see the breakdown of.
We do have the breakdown, yes, and if that is a desire of others, we can get, we can get. Yeah.
Sometimes versus the whole.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
a large percentage fall into
Extra,
sometimes, and we're still digging into this data because there are so many questions, and we like to look not only at how students responded this year, but we compare it to previous years. We will do a presentation to the board too, in probably next month, next month, it's almost April, wow. As we dig into that more, but yes, we do have that. So typically, if you were to break these lines down into the no, never, the sometimes, and the yes, for this question in particular, the bulk of the students are gonna have answered sometimes.
And we also have the information on a typical youth truth school and where they fall in the
Yeah.
sometimes and where the California falls in sometimes, so we can compare all of that.
Yeah, and our goals obviously are to move, more to the absolute positive, for sure. And this question in particular is a really interesting one to think about, because it does, when students are thinking about answering this question, it's not just about their experience at Bacich, it's about kind of their experience of the world too. And, one thing I've been thinking a lot about is that, our campus is locked, like we literally have locked and closed gates. So how does that feel for a student if they then see a gate left open, right? Or how do they feel if there's a stranger at a gate asking them to open a gate, which still happens regularly, right? So does that affect their sense of safety? I would think so. So I think there are a lot of factors for students in choosing sometimes, which is why the Youth Truth organizers and the ones who really dive into this consider that a positive response as opposed to a negative response.
I'm wondering if you have any takeaways from like this series of slides or ways that we could be thinking about or interpreting, right? With academic results, behavioral, and then what you survey is saying.
Yeah, we do. And we'll get into a little bit more. We have a little bit more to present to you, and then we really want to leave as much time as possible for your questions and to answer and have some discussion. So I think overall our takeaways are that we have areas to grow in. We have academic areas to grow, right? I don't want any kid to be in that pink, on not meeting a benchmark expectation. So we dive into the data even more than that in terms of demographics, like we break it down. Who are these students? We have spreadsheets and lists, and so we know who those 3 students are who are far below and what services are we connecting them to. But I think, overall takeaways for you is that I think as a 3rd grade group, they're relatively strong. We haven't seen dips from 2nd grade to 3rd grade. There is some difference between this particular cohort and our current 4th grade cohort. But again, that's not so atypical in education to see, different cohorts of kids have different strengths. So we feel good about the data, but we also are always wanting to use the data to inform what we're doing next so that we're moving towards improvement.
So this next slide, I've gotten, myself and Maria have gotten a lot of questions about this, like, what is it that guides you in deciding how many classes you're gonna have, or what the grade levels are gonna look like? And there's kind of 3 different categories that we wanted to present to you tonight. So the first is around the education code. So we are guided by education code, and this really outlines what the expectations would be within a public system. And so you can see here, this is straight from the California Department of Education, their website. It speaks to grade levels and class sizes and what's required. These numbers are extremely high compared to what we've experienced here in Kentfield and many of the schools, quite frankly, in Marin County. The next is board policy, right? So the board has a couple of areas in which they have authority. One of those is the policies in which they adopt and approve for us to implement here within our schools. And so this here is our board policy specifically around class size. So you can see in here, it speaks to maintaining class size at an average of about 24 students. This is very aspirational. So that's what they work towards doing. It doesn't say that we're required or bound by this, but that's something that we're working towards.
What is the current 3rd grade class size?
We have some slides coming.
Yeah,
up.
well, share in a moment. Bottom line, 2 classes of 26, 2 classes of 27. And then this here is our collective bargain agreement. And this is what we agree with our staff to say, what are the ratios in which we're gonna stay aligned to in our work with them. And so in here, you have a 25-to-1 ratio. And then there's some flexibility of 2 students over that number. So 28 is really the highest theoretically that we could go before we would start providing some of these additional resources that we've agreed to through collective bargaining with our teachers. And that's specifically for K-5 excluding 1st grade. So 1st grade is a 1 to 22. And then 6th through 8th grade is something that comes to the board in early March. And so the board has approved a 1 to 30 ratio. Now, realistically, we haven't typically had core classes at 30 to 1 at our middle school, and nor do we typically have a 1 to 28 at our elementary school in grades K-5 excluding 1st. So anyways, I just wanted people to have these so you know it kind of like starts here. This is like the most stringent, and then slowly there can be some local decisions made based on how you agree with your bargaining units and or how the board policy gets adopted by your board.
And just a quick question, why is the 1st grade classroom different?
So 1st grade is where kids really learn to read. And so there's an interest in wanting to try to have those classes smaller because that's such a focus in that grade level.
So this slide shows you our projected enrollment for next year for 23-24. So the 2 grade levels that really we are we're not guessing, we're making an informed projection in TK and K. So those are new students. Well, kindergarten does include the current TKers rolling into kindergarten, right? But then we get other new students at those 2 grade levels. So we have projected 40 students based on the way the TK program is rolling out. Is there's an additional 2 more months of eligibility from this current school year. So we have 26 current TKers, but we're adding 2 more months of eligibility. So we're projecting 40 students for next year. Kindergarten, the projections are based on historically, how many registrations have we had? We also look at birth rate data, we look at neighboring districts, and we make projections there. So the others are a little easier because you're just rolling the current group into the next grade level. So for next year's first, we have 109. That's how many kindergartners we have. Next year's second, 87. So you'll see that next year's 3rd and 4th are almost exactly the same number of students, 105, 106. So what I've done here is basically put 3 different options to figure out class size in those grade levels. So for your students, I'll start with 4th. So there's 106. And obviously this is again a projection because even though we know they're rolling over, some people move away, some people move in. So the final number may be a little different than 106. With 106 kids in 4 classes, the average is 27. That's what we have on the ground for us right now while they're in 3rd. We have 4 classes. 2 have 26 students, 2 have 27 students. So rounding up, right, 26.5, I round up to 27. If you, I'll skip the middle column for now. If you put them into 5 classes, you have an average of 21. It comes out to like 21.2 or something like that. 4.5 is a combination class, which I will talk more about in a moment, but a combination class, the average is going to come out to about 24. Although the combination class itself can be a smaller class, leaving the remaining standalone classes at about 24. It's the same scenario for next year's third, because they're at 105. So 4 classes, they end up at 26. 5 classes, they end up at 21, and 4.5 classes, they end up at an average of 23.
How many classes do they have right now?
The second grade currently, we currently have 5 classes for second grade. Yeah. They were in 5 classes in first grade. Remember that smaller class size in first grade, and so that was a tricky balancing decision too that we had to make. Were we rolling them into 5 or were we rolling them into 4 sections? And we landed on 5.
Just make an observation, like I think, have we considered one of the reasons why we have such a dispersion in math and reading versus the 4th graders is because our kids were remote all of first grade, which is really the key year that you're kind of talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Each of these, I mean, for this school year, even last school year, and certainly going forward, each cohort of kids, we are very much aware of where they were in their development when COVID hit, right? So which grade were they in March of 2020? When did they go home? How did they start? You know, what grade were they in when they started that next grade as well? And so we are aware of where this group of kids was as much as we are what the 4th graders were experiencing. Our kindergartners, right? They were learning to talk when people were wearing masks. So each group of kids kind of has a particular impact that COVID hit them in a way different from other grades. So yes. So that middle column was the combination class. And I thought that I would talk about why even talk about the combination class. Did you have a question first?
What is the combination?
Yeah, I'm about to tell you. So, yeah. So a combination class is a,
Really, the slide that had the California requirements for student to teacher ratio and then Bacich and the board. Yeah. Is there any sort of commitment or agreement for paraprofessionals that we hold, like, no, so it's just. When do you
no, in fact, we're one of the very few schools in our county that still has general education paraprofessionals. Most schools are now down to just using paraprofessionals in special education. So staffing paraprofessionals is definitely part of the planning process. It affects the budget, right? It affects that piece. So for this year, what we did, typically, as you go through the grades here, the amount of paraprofessional support in a classroom, the number of minutes decreases with age, right? So you typically see fewer paraprofessional minutes in a 4th grade class compared to a 2nd grade class. But for this year, because the class size for 3rd grade was larger than both 2nd and 4th, right from the beginning of the year, we prioritized 3rd with additional paraprofessional time. So from the beginning of the year, 3rd grade got more than 2nd and 4th because of the higher class size. And then, as Raquel mentioned, so here, really, we're bound, once we get to 28 is when these things are kind of triggered, how you're gonna alleviate the overcrowding. But what we did, even knowing we had 26 and 27, we got a couple more students, because I think we started off, everybody was at 26, we got a few students in, a few people moved, but once I saw that 27 number in 2 of my 3rd grade classes, we added additional paraprofessional support specifically dedicated for 3rd grade. So they started the year with more, and then we even increased it in right around the holiday time. So so staffing in general, how many paraprofessionals we're going to have in any given year, that number is in part dependent on how many, how many teachers we have, the budget that's available to do that. And then where to put them is another determination. Okay, so accommodation class is when you have in one general education classroom, you have more than one grade level of students. Typically in Marin County, it's 2 grade level. So might have a 1-2 combination class. Some of the students are in 1st grade, some are in 2nd grade. We could have a 2-3, could have a 3-4. We do have neighboring districts who currently have combination classes. They're also known as multi-age classrooms, multi-age education. We have had them before at Bacich. We haven't had them for some time. School districts use them for a variety of reasons, including when the numbers are such that kind of supports, it doesn't support, 5, it doesn't support 4. 4.5 is a good number. So I know that there's a lot of well, not everybody knows or has experience with combination classes. So my purpose in this slide is just more education. We haven't landed on any, we haven't made any final decisions, but I just wanted to give you where we are and why that's even an option that we're considering.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Sorry. What's the general methodology that's been used in the past to determine whether, like, how do you combine students of 3rd and 4th grade? Yeah.
Oh, I can speak to that. Let me finish speaking to this. So classes of 21 to 22 in 3rd and 4th grade obviously have a greater financial impact on the overall budget because you need more teachers to do that. So in thinking of 3rd and 4th, if they're both staffed at 5, that's 10 teachers. They're both staffed at 4, that's 8 teachers. If there are 4 standalones in a combination class, that's 9 teachers. So there are financial implications for any of those options. I believe that the current 3rd grade class needs something different from this year, meaning that the option of rolling them into 4 4th grade classes is not very appealing. I also, it's not quite on here, I also think our 3rd grade teachers need something different. So rolling the current 2nd grade into 4 3rd grade classes, I feel like from those kids' standpoint and the teacher standpoint, that's not ideal either.
What is it that you're seeing though? Like what specifically makes you say that, kids wise, staff wise, I mean, for the
Well,
district here, maybe.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think for this cohort of students, given what they missed out on, right, the social emotional learning piece, I think they're not a typical 3rd grade pre-pandemic group of kids. So with that has come more social emotional needs, more social skills, more how do we get along with each other, more how do we come together and coexist in a classroom space for 6 hours a day. I think that there's some maturity that is atypical for what we might have seen and expected prior to the pandemic. So and we're seeing that with all kids. It's not, not just this group. Our physical space, the size of the desks, the moving around the classrooms, those are all considerations. I mean, I spend a lot of time in classrooms and there's a difference when you have 24 versus when you have 27, it feels different. There's more kids, right? So there are more parents, there's more parent communication, there are more papers to grade, there's more, kids to make individual plans for in terms of what does this particular student need to get to the next step in their education. There's just more of it. So I think that's why on that previous slide that Raquel talked about, the board and our agreement with our CBA with our teachers reflect that we don't really, as a school, want to be guided by the numbers that the state has identified, that we want to be somewhere lower than that. And we have historically. We've also, this isn't the first time that we've had 27 kids in a class. I taught 27 in 4th grade. And actually it was one of my favorite classes ever, but of groups of kids. It was pre-pandemic. And yeah, it was tight. It was like, I had to organize the desks a certain way in order for it to work, and if this kid put their chair out too far, we couldn't get through. And there those things come up for sure. So a multi-age or combination class allows for smaller standalone classes for the remaining classes. So of those 106 3rd graders to be 4th graders next year, if I took 10 of them and put them in a combination class, and I took 10 of the rising 3rd graders and put them in a combination class. Now you have a class of 20 students, 10 3rd graders, 10 4th graders. The remaining standalone classes now have a lower average than they would have if we did 4, right? You're basically taking 10 off. So there's some class size advantage to that model. There's also some research. So this isn't just a numbers game. There's actually research that shows some real benefits of multi-age education, which is why many schools operate regularly combination classes. There's increased peer-to-peer learning, which builds self-confidence, which is definitely a great thing for this particular cohort of kids. Friendships across grade levels boost social skills. There's typically a strong sense of community, which encourages emotional well-being. And there is some research that shows some improved academic outcomes versus the standalone class. There are some negatives, right? There's additional planning for the teacher and administration. There's additional considerations for building class lists. That list in particular, thinking about which students would be appropriate for that class. For us, because we have an enrichment schedule, we have a master schedule, it adds some complications for that. The 3rd graders would go to 3rd grade chorus. The 4th graders would go to 4th grade chorus, right? So, which actually has some potential positives. So you could have a scenario in which the 3rd graders are out, the 10 3rd graders are out at 3rd grade chorus. And now you have a 1-to-10 ratio for the 4th graders who remain in class, and vice versa happens when the 4th graders go to 4th grade chorus. Now you have a 1-to-10 ratio for the 3rd graders. So even though there's some complications in working all that out, there are some even additional benefits. So now it doesn't have to be a class of 20, it could be a class of 22, it could be a class of 24. But
Are they learning math together?
they could be, but mostly they're not. So an example for math is multiplication. So 3rd graders are usually introduced to multiplication, and 4th graders are usually kind of reinforcing and practicing those fluency skills. So there is some overlap, and there are some opportunities for joint lessons and learning. But typically what you see and what you see now in a classroom of whatever 20, 26, 27 kids, the teacher isn't necessarily teaching the math lesson to all 27 kids at the same time. The teacher might be teaching the math lesson to half of the students, and the other half are doing something independent, or they're working with a paraprofessional. And so in a combination class, you can have that same setup where, so I'm teaching the 3rd grade math lesson to the 3rd graders. The 4th graders are working on something else, right, at that time, and then there's a swap. So, third graders get third grade curriculum and progress towards third grade standards. The fourth graders, the same thing. Sometimes there's overlap for sure. And sometimes there's models where for certain subjects, they might choose one grade level or the other and then do a looping. So that sounds confusing, but let me explain. So if we did a third, fourth combination class next year, for social studies, for example, you could teach the whole class the fourth grade social studies curriculum. That means the third graders are getting fourth grade social studies as third graders. Then those third graders loop the next year, they're still in the third, fourth combo, but now they're fourth graders. Now you teach the whole class the third grade social studies. So there's different models. You can get really creative. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how those 10 third graders and 10 fourth graders get chosen to be in that class? 'Cause I guess the thing I worry about is like, if my kid is in that class, what they think of themselves as, like, it sounds like for 2 years, they might be in that for 2 years, and like, are they the weird kids, or are they the, you know, like it's, so that's the part that worries me.
So some of the same considerations that we take into account now. So our process for building class lists really is the teachers. It starts with the teachers because they're the ones who know your kids. So they work on creating a balanced class. Balance meaning they look at academics, they look at social dynamics, they look at behavior, they look at a variety of things, and they build a class that is, very heterogeneous class. So they would be the same ones to think about this model and who would be appropriate for this model. At some schools, really focus on the sense of being an independent learner for a 3-4 combination class, but that's not necessarily a factor that we would have to use. It's not that you're expected to just go figure it out yourself because the teacher is working with a different grade level of kids. But there are behavioral considerations. You would want, you would want kids who are open to it too, right? That cross grade level friendship is super important. There's that confidence building for the fourth graders. Typically, it's a really good opportunity for confidence building, to be the older one, to the peer-to-peer learning opportunities and teaching opportunities are really good. So I think it's all how we present it and do we normalize it and I'm excited about the prospect of it. I think that it could be a really great program, and I think that 20 third and fourth graders might actually feel like they hit the lottery of being in that class. But it's not for everybody. It's not for every family. And I've had families emailing me saying, I hear this rumor and I don't want my kid in there. And I've had families email me and say, sign me up. Where do I sign on the dotted line? So, we typically don't take requests when we're making class lists because in a school our size, it's just too complicated to do that. And really, we trust our teachers that they know your students, and they usually do a really good job of building class lists.
I definitely, developmentally speaking, it resonates in terms of the empowerment piece. The older brother would have the older sister model teaching. You learn really well by teaching others, all of that kind of thing. But if you are speaking to you're saying that they are already developmentally, socially, emotionally behind, which is what we are seeing with the majority of this class, and that there's so much strife. Not so much academic. I see it more in the social emotional piece. Developmentally, to then put these fourth graders in with the younger cohort, what is that doing for their developmental gain? To not be with their peers, to not be kind of moving forward developmentally, because it's a big divide. Fourth and fifth, not as, looking at kids developmentally, there's a big leap between third and fourth. there's not as big of a leap in fourth and fifth, or maybe if it was a, you know, pre-pandemic situation where kids were developmentally, meeting their standards. The model is phenomenal, it's this.
I think it depends on the student, really, because for some students, the difference between a fourth grader and a fifth grader is huge.
Sure.
And for other kids, it's not, right? And when you're out in the yard, it's third and fourth grade recess, right? They have recess time together currently. So you see mixed groups of kids playing all the time, and you see some kids do that regularly, and you see other kids never do that, right? So you have third graders who have older siblings who are used to being with older kids, and you have third graders who have younger siblings and have that experience as well. So I think that, we can make kind of generalized statements about the cohort, but you really have to look individually. And I think that there are many students for whom this could be a really good match, and there are students who it wouldn't be. And the current second graders rising into third, they have their own personality and they have their own kind of chemistry as a class, and we're looking at that too. Like, what are their needs, right, as well? So
Feels like we're trying to talk ourselves into it almost though, because the starting point of this seems to be, we would not consider it if there were not budget issues. And so we're trying to say this is great for the kids, it's a positive, yet the only reason we're doing it is because we don't have money. And so it's a different starting point than if we had a ton of money and we're like, hey, we're gonna do this because it's great for the kids.
yes and no. I mean, Raquel can talk to the budget piece too, but I think that one thing I've learned from being in this role is that, even if money isn't an option, it doesn't mean you spend it irresponsibly, right? You still have to look at the other pieces of the program. Are there staffing positions that we don't currently have that we would want to have? Are there, are there new materials? Are there, that we would want to look at? So I think it's not just a matter of, oh, we don't have the money to do 5 and 5. It's how can we be responsible with the funds that we have? They're public funds, they're your funds, right? They're taxpayer funds. And so there's a certain level of fiscal responsibility and care that needs to come in with every dollar that we spend. And so that the budget piece is part of any conversation that we have as a public school. It just has to be.
And I think the other thing I just chime in is that it is not something typical that's been here at Bacich or here in the Kentfield School District, although it has happened, but there are some schools that model themselves all around multi-age programs. So and that's how they've been designed. So, and those are right here in Marin County. So I think it's, Larkspur's got combo classes too. So the money is a piece for us to be mindful of, and we have to be thinking about that, but also it's hard when we haven't seen it. And, this cohort of parents haven't seen a combination class happen. And so that's scary. And that's it's unknown, right? There's been already a lot of unknown. And so we just want to acknowledge that, but open the conversation for it, because there could be some real benefits to it too.
And so here, it's just, my concern is we were the guinea pig with a larger class size this year with, a pandemic impacted, third grade class, and now we're gonna be potentially the guinea pig again on a combo class. And I agree, in theory, it could work great, but to me, it's highly dependent on the teacher probably. If the teacher is not good, it's gonna be a terrible outcome. And our kids, those kids will be further behind.
And part of our planning, so this next slide is about our planning timeline and planning considerations, right? So here, consider teacher experience and interest, right? Obviously, every year when we think about who's going to teach what, because we constantly have shifts, right? We have 5 kindergarten classes this year, and we're talking about 4 next year. We have 4 first grades, and we're talking about 5 next year. So there's always movement. And so this piece is really important, right? So every year we survey our staff. What have you taught in the past? What are you teaching currently? And what are you interested in teaching, right? And so all of this that's been presented to you tonight as options have also been shared with our staff. And so they have had the opportunity to sit and think about what they might want to do. A lot of times you get to a point in your career where you're ready for something different. And so that, and my role, part of my role is to match people up in a way that is best for the educational program and best for the students, right? So I'm not going to put a teacher who doesn't have the experience and interest in a situation to set them up for failure, set the kids up for failure. We're in the business of getting the best student outcomes possible. We're also in the business of supporting our teachers so they can grow in the profession, so we can retain the quality of teachers that we have. So, that's going to be a big piece of any movement, which happens every single year.
First of all, I want to say thank you for having this meeting. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. It's like, and you showed the data. And three things really stood out to me. And then I have a question. So one was going back to your strategic plan and that each and every, and really thinking about what is the best strategy to achieve that. And number two, you had the data on the youth truth actually doesn't look that great for our kids. And I'd kind of go back to some comments over here around the social emotional. I think if you would ask the parents in here, like I have another kid and they didn't struggle like this. Now every kid's different, but I really feel like that year of Zoom, I would go back to that. And second, I just feel like I'd love to know what is the basic strategy. If you're a new leader, Maria, you get to kind of like, this is your year, right? Create your SIPs, and I feel like what sets Bacich apart, right? And, I really love the third piece of data I love was seeing that the board had made this commitment to ideally having these classes of 22 kids. And I would hope, at least my perspective, I mean, I taught mixed grade classes. I love it. You're right. Some teachers love it. I did it for 3 years. I thought it was like the hardest thing ever. So it does take a really good teacher to do it. And I would love for just like to invite you to think about like, I hear the strategy running through your head of, oh, maybe we just keep doing mixed grades, but what if we also made a commitment to small class sizes and just said, hey, we've been paying for paraprofessionals and could we lump that together to kind of have this, right? So I just want to put a pitch in for that and would love to hear kind of like strategy wise, how does this relate back to that mission and how does it relate back to kind of the data in the board? In
Absolutely.
your head, kind of like that question of how are you making sense of this data?
Absolutely. And it's all part of the decision making, right? Like paraprofessionals, reading intervention, math intervention, like all of the different auxiliary supports that we have, thinking about every learner, there's kids who are making great strides because of some of those things. So you have to think long and hard about getting rid of those things in favor of classes of 21 with one teacher as opposed to classes of 24 with a teacher and a paraprofessional, right? So,
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
feel like, again, I still think Bacich, or having been here for 5 years, is kind of reinventing itself right now. And it's kind of a time to think about like what sets us apart peripherally. And I actually think class sizes could be something that we can plan for and budget for. But you're right, there's going to be sacrifices, like maybe we can't have so many specialists and we can't have an innovation teacher or whatever it is. But I don't know, I would might think about that as, because if you commit to mixed grade, that commits you for a while, right? When you said that, I think that would be a whole strategy. And like Bacich would have to own that. And so that's my plug for small classes. I think it really could set Bacich apart.
I also think just.
Yeah.
Oh, I was also going to say thank you. This is very thoughtful and very helpful, and I've learned a lot tonight. And I'm really grateful to all the other parents for being here. I did want to say you did the slide on, it sounds like what I'm hearing anecdotally tonight, and then also just on the ground. There are a lot of social, emotional things happening in this grade. I don't know if you have any more. I know you showed like the incidents that had reports sent home or whatever, but like, I don't know if there's anything else that's just like, there must be something that you're talking that like supports what we're hearing, or maybe, I mean, this is a unique third grade class is sort of a euphemism for they're struggling. Like, this has been a really hard year. And I don't know if the answer is a split class. I don't know if the answer is an extra class.
I trust you. I have never had a bad teacher here, even when I never met her because we were on Zoom. But I just hope, yes, you take that into consideration because it's been hard to see them struggle and they do love being at school.
Thank you.
So I echo what was just said, but I also do think, I guess what I have a hard time with it a little bit, it feels. I totally think it's good for us to try different things and the budget doesn't seem to ever get any better. And maybe a combo class thing is a whole, I think, maybe not the strategy we want, but maybe that is the strategy, is to, for keeping classrooms smaller in future for the entire school. I just think it's tough when this class was just that kindergarten class with the pandemic that they become the experiment class, I guess, feels a little risky, a little, that gives me not some comfort. Especially also, at least for me, as I'm a super fan of Kent, but it was a big step up for my other kid to go to Kent. And that was the year we had you as a fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Marshall as a fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Stone, and you're now thankfully in charge of the school, but the rest of them are Kent. So that, it just gives me this comfort, and just an anecdote, I was in my garage cleaning something out, and a bunch of posters fell down, and I saw my 7th graders' projects from 3rd and 4th grade fall out, or second heritage. And I'm like, I don't have this. It's like, there was a presentation this year, I know that, but I remember that presentation in 3rd grade with my other kid, and there's no data behind that, but that's just a little bit of a feeling that, I don't know, the depth hasn't been there with the second kid, and maybe that's unique to our situation, but there's just a feeling that the projects aren't getting the same time to be completed or level of depth. And that's my concern with adding other elements to the situation.
Gloria, is there, to what Ed was asking, is if there wasn't a financial strain on the school right now, would we be doing this and put a plug in and the take number, like, is the other option that you guys could put in front of us, like, we could do this, or this is the additional funding for the school?
Yes.
So I mean, we'll leave it up to you guys and we trust that you'll make that. I think what you're hearing is that, what we've just said is that we're all concerned for our kids. And we don't want them to be the guinea pigs. Maybe some of us do, and if that's okay, and we want to you, that's great. But I think that a lot of us are worried about just one other thing. So as you guys are putting forth the options, we would love to also hear the option of, like, if we could get X amount more funding, then potentially we could hire another teacher and keep profit smaller. I think that's choice number one for all of us. We want a smaller class size, but at the same exact time, we want to know kind of what that is.
No, I appreciate what you said, and I, pretty much knew that going into this meeting, that if I gave you 3 or 4 options, that would be the number one option, right? 5 3rd grades next year and 5 4th grades next year, 21 kids in a grade. Maybe with or without paraprofessionals, you might have differing opinions about that. But so, yeah, so I hear that, I hear you, and I'm a mom too, I'm a mom of a child who didn't get to go on the Gold Country trip because of COVID,
Say what happened when 4th graders go to go.
and like they just went, they're in 7th grade and they just went on a field trip for the first time since the early part of their 4th grade. So, I think, I'm not trying to minimize what your kids lost and by any means, but I think that every learner is super important because they all missed something. And we as parents missed a lot as well. And so, we're here to do the best for each of our Bacich Bears going forward. We want to set them up for success, and we want their outcomes, learning outcome, academic, social, emotional outcomes to be, the best they possibly can. And we'll work with whatever options and limitations that we have to make sure that's what we accomplish.
Is there data supporting back to the academic aspect of this? I know there's a lot of talk about the social and emotional aspect, but back to the academics, is there data supporting fourth graders in this third, fourth combination continuing to excel? Like the percentages that you were showing us of like second and third, but is there any data that says, because we're probably all worried about the academics, if they're put with third graders. So that would be an interesting thing to see, is data supporting the continued improvement and success of fourth graders that are put in that combination class.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have our Bacich data, the research shows improved academic outcomes. We could look to our neighbors, to our partners, to dig in a little bit more to that specific data, because we do have neighboring schools who employ that model. But yeah, we haven't had a combination class of Bacich for a long time, so we don't really have any data that would be relevant, for us looking at that decision for right now. And the last time I think we had combination classes, it was a younger grade.
Can I ask a question over here? This kind of like piggybacking on what a lot of people said, what Laura was talking about, like, I do feel like I've got a daughter in 5th grade now, and I feel like the culture of Bacich has really been shaken, through these years. Like there was a strong culture sort of pre-pandemic. We ended up switching, had a new vice principal and principal for 2 years during the pandemic, which just seemed like a cluster for a lot of us, right? And then now we've got you guys, and which is wonderful. And I kind of, backing what Laura said, I think it is kind of important that we find our culture and what we stand out for in this community. So I feel like it kind of feels lost as a parent. It just feels like, who are we? What do we stand for, right? And if we're talking about the fact that our kids developmentally missed out on stuff, they missed out on the basics, right? They missed out on how to be a friend, how to treat people well. They missed out on like how to sit in a classroom and how to be respectful to the teacher and how to talk to the teacher, right? These are all things that they missed out on being, out in kindergarten and then 1st grade on Zoom, when it's, let's be real, it's not developmentally appropriate to be sitting watching a screen for 1st grade. It's just not, right? And they were like many were forced to do this. So I kind of feel like, as we're talking about this, isn't the whole point of this sort of like to bring it back to the basics? We've got behavioral issues in the classroom. We've got, enrichment teachers having to spend the first 10 minutes of their class and all this teaching time trying to get the kids in order and do not talk. So the kids that are maybe acting out or having all this, focus on them, and they're becoming these sort of problem kids. And then the other kids are just kind of sitting there and waiting to actually get taught, right? So if we're talking about it, like bringing it back to basics, like can we somehow bring in the classroom how to be a student, how, in smaller class sizes, to me, seems like sort of the answer. It's like, this is our way that we're going to bring it back. We're going to have these smaller classes. We're going to have them sort of more nuclear and like really do some like teaching. And how, is there a way that Bacich can sort of reinstate that teaching that they have to kind of, but it seems like a smaller classroom would be the way to kind of just, I don't know, I keep on thinking bring it back to the basics and kind of have this culture, because I just think these kids, they did miss out on a lot. And, having a 3rd and 4th grade classroom, yeah, it's this and it's that, but it's like, they really just need to like take a deep breath and just sigh and just kind of relax. And I just think right now it's like so amped up in these like big classrooms and behavioralness. And if they can just kind of have a smaller class to just relax, and the teachers can be more relaxed, because I think there was also something about the kids that were more advanced actually dropping math score tests and math and reading. And that's kind of concerning too, because it's like, but I get it. Like if the teachers are having to like put out fires everywhere, like, and not because they're not a good teacher, they're amazing teachers, right? But they only have so much energy and they only have so much time. And so the kids that are doing great and not causing issues are kind of like, maybe a little bit more, right? So I just think it's, I don't know. I'm talking a lot and saying it, but I just think it's like exactly basic. Sorry.
I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate I think we all appreciate all of, your comments and I think all of those things are important, right? I think kids, there's some reteaching and third grade teachers have had to reach down to first grade, strategies, and second grade teachers have had to reach down to kindergarten strategies. That's kind of the teaching world that we live in because of the pandemic. And so we have these conversations, a lot, and several of the things that we've put in place this year are a direct result of the behavior and the post-COVID effect things that we were experiencing last year, and how much class time was taken up when kids were coming back from recess and having all these conflict and teachers having to stop, like you said, and 10 minutes to go to this. So our team time, our assemblies, our just our win time, not having kids like coming and going and being these yo-yo kids, like there are a lot of things that we've done in direct response to some of the experiences that we had last year. And we continue to fine tune and to address, and Marie and I make adjustments all the time. We go into certain classrooms where we think that they could use some support, either with an SEL lesson or just our presence, right? So yeah, these kids need some things that are different from what third graders needed 5 years ago.
At camp, there's a learning plus class, right? Like
Learning Center Plus, is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Yes. Are you talking about the special education class?
Or
Or are you talking about something else?
I just remember we get pulled out and we go to the learning.
Yes, the learning
So
center.
I know
there's Learning Center, the Learning Center for students with IEPs for learning.
Right.
They're working on particular goals, and Learning Center Plus is also a special education class. Kent, because they're middle school and they have periods, their day runs on periods, they have extended math and extended reading. Students who go to those intervention courses miss out on social studies or science or history. So our model is different in terms of intervention for kids. So we do have intervention, we have reading intervention, we have math intervention. We have Learning Center, we have Learning Center Plus, we have those things. It just looks different because we don't have first period, second period, third period, fourth period, like a middle school.
I have a question. So if we know that there are academic and social emotional challenges in this grade, and we would agree that a smaller class size would be ideal if we can afford it. Adding another teacher, if we can pay for that teacher, would seem to make sense for every student. Because I think the teachers will move around given enrollment in different classes. So it's not like they'll stay in Florida forever. They may go down to third and go to second or kinder. So I guess my question is, if the resources are there to create another teacher, and we know we're concerned about this third grade class or not fourth grade, and it could be third next year, whatever it's going to be, it won't ever hurt to have another teacher.
Well, it certainly won't hurt the academic program if you're not losing something else as a result, right? So if you're adding a teacher in order to lower class size, there are some benefits to that. There's both from the teacher standpoint, the student standpoint, culture standpoint in the classroom that you guys talked about. But there's always implications like for your whole budget as far as what else you may or may not be able to do as a result of having
I think it does
additional.
boil down to priorities
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
what it is, but it does
Absolutely.
feel as a school, academic and social emotional are the big kahunas.
So maybe we
Yeah.
step out on innovation for a second, like to Laura's point, it not,
Yeah.
I love that we have it. And
Good
don't
idea.
get me wrong.
There's
Okay.
other constraints,
Sure.
just so you know,
Sure,
like,
sure.
so we talked about some of the contract. So at elementary school, the only way a teacher gets a prep is when the class goes to an enrichment class. So the
Okay.
fewer enrichment classes you have, the less prep time you have as a general education teacher. And it's actually written into our contract. We have certain contractual obligations to get general education teachers a certain number of preps, and we accomplish that through enrichment programs. We also, I think, talking about like our culture and what do we stand for and who are we? I think that's a big piece of who we are and who we have been, especially compared to neighboring districts, right? We have a chorus program and a music program, and we have an art and teacher, we have a PE, we have a library, full-time librarian. These are things that not all elementary schools in our area have. And we have those things because we value what they bring to our students and to our community. All of our work over the last couple years with social justice and social emotional learning, like Susan Warnick is so instrumental in supporting that work through the books that she orders, through connecting us to resources. So, those are what I just named, like 5 staff members that are really integral to who we are. And so to consider putting some of those aside or not having any of those in favor of something else is a really big consideration.
Okay, sorry, is there, I know that we can't technically fund teachers in this district, but can we reallocate to if we could raise the money through KIC, could we then move around some of the school administration budget in order to fund an incremental teacher?
More money, of course, it would help us with hiring additional staff, for sure, but something's got to give. We just, right now we have to make decisions, and I don't know when we would know if KIC is going to give more money or if a private funder is going to give more money. So we have some set timelines that we have to abide by. And based on how the enrollment continues to shake out, we could also, we've hired somebody in August, right? We've had those scenarios come into play. So it really is a moving target at some level. We have to adopt our budget by June. And we can also look at, what restricted dollars might we say, okay, maybe what we do is we say for this 1 year, we're going to decide that we're going to 50% fund something with restricted state and federal money and 50% unrestricted money. But that means that we're not going to have additional paraprofessionals, for example, right? So those are decisions. I think some of the people are mentioning that. Those are things that Maria and I are continuously talking about. Like some of the auxiliary supports that we have are those. Do we really need to have those, or is it better to go back to the basics, right? That Jessica was saying. So that's all part of what the conversations are that we're having. If, we continue to get donations from our community, we welcome that wholeheartedly. But we're trying to really be smart about kind of how we're planning things out. And I think Ed made the point about it really is the teacher. And so you can have a class that's 1 to 18. If you don't have an effective teacher in that class, it's not going to make a difference. There's still not going to be such a positive experience. So just big picture wise, I think we have to keep that in mind.
And I understand that. I think that for us, and I'll speak for some of us in here, hopefully with most of us, is that what we're here for is that we may not necessarily want our child to be the one that's in that.
Yeah.
So that's where the concern is really coming, and where the options we're asking you for options is that if we don't feel that that is comfortable for our family, if we don't feel that our child will benefit from being in the 3rd to 4th grade class. Now, I know that that's at the discretion of the teacher, but I think we would also love to have a say in it. So that's what we're asking. For some people, it may be really comfortable and it's great. And, for that person, it's awesome. But I think that some of us may have concerns that, with what they have gone through, going back to basics, going back to kind of what we feel is right for our child, can we have an option or a say in it?
I think that feedback would be really, I've already thought about that. If that's where we land, I would foresee sending out a quick Google form questionnaire with no promises or guarantees that it's not a request form, but just a temperature check. And maybe I have 25 people who say, yeah, they really want to do it. And then we can do it that way. Right. So I would welcome that feedback because, if a parent writes me and says, please, please, please don't put my child in such and such a class because we have this history, we used to be business partners and blah, blah, it was a big mess, right? I'm not gonna do that to either party, right? I'm not gonna do that to the family. I'm not gonna do that to the teacher. Why set them up for conflict or for a year that is just not gonna work well? So in that vein, right, I would want to know where you stand. So I would seek that feedback, but without like guarantees
Guarantee.
that you're like opting out of something and you know you're not gonna be in it. It would definitely be another source of information as we build the class lists.
That would be great. I think that's what we could hope for. is
Yeah.
just-
Yeah.
Have you considered doing this with the first and second grade classes versus our class that has already been through so much? Especially because first and second, it's still kind of the learning to read fundamentals years. Versus kind of throwing this on this class that, I mean, we didn't have those learning to read fundamental years in general, like they really need to be set up for success.
And then all of the, I mean, sorry for second grade, but like, not just one class, like maybe that, like back to like, is this a better model, is this a good model? But it seems like they're very much focused on the basics of reading.
Well, first grade, definitely. And so, I just go back to this slide just because the numbers matter, where it works and where it doesn't work, or where it helps solve an issue of large classes and where it doesn't. So, the first grade with 109 students, it's just clear we have to do 5 classes there. That puts them at 22, right? And so in second grade, 87 students, it's 4 classes. It's like there isn't an issue to solve there that would somehow free up a teacher somewhere else. You see what I'm saying?
The first and second.
Yeah.
From kindergarten.
Across.
So we look at all of this. I mean, we look at all of it, and we look at different combination classes that we see in our neighboring districts. There are some grade level combinations that you just really typically don't see. And there are some that are more common. In fact, one common one is second and third. There's huge scheduling implications for our current schedule, with first and second being on a different like recess and lunch schedule than our third and fourth graders. So there's those as well. So we look at all of it every year. We look at.
Where's our extra kindergarten teacher going? Like, are we? Maybe my numbers are off, but it looks like we're letting go of a teacher. We have 5 kindergarten teachers right now.
We need 5. We only have 4 first grade, so we need 5. We need 5.
But
We have
then-
4 first grades and we have 5, so that's
The
swapping.
first and the second switch, right? There are 4 classes now. Or there. But aren't there
movement.
are 5 first grade classes now, right?
No, there are 4.
5 second grade.
There's 5 seconds. Current.
That's the question.
Uh-huh.
How do we not do this? Like, what do you need?
How do we
to not do this?
Well,
It's a really honest question.
I'll answer it. It's, first of all,
It's $150,000.
Is it $150,000? Because I feel like that's the question that everyone wants to know. Like,
it's
can we?
for a
pay
year.
pay?
for a year, potentially that's what it is, but then if there's ongoing costs, if you're hiring somebody, you want to keep them, you're putting in energy and time to do that. So we haven't landed anywhere. These are options. We still are looking at our enrollment. We're still closely looking at our TK and K enrollment, because those have domino effects of the rest of everything else. We don't know yet how many we have at those grade levels. We also look at the 3rd and 4th grade enrollment for next year. Are we getting new students? Is anyone telling us that they're moving away, right? So we're still in that planning process. We haven't landed anywhere. Just wanted to be transparent about the options that we're considering. So 4 classes, 4.5 or 5, right? I pretty much told you that I really don't want to do 4 because we know what that looks like for them. 26, 27 doesn't feel right to do again to this same cohort of students in another year with a different group of kids. Like I said, I've taught 27 at kindergarten. I've taught 27 at 4th grade. I've taught 25 at kindergarten, both very successful years. So it's not the raw number itself that is necessarily the issue. It's, does it work for this cohort of kids, or so all of those things are factors that we're looking at, and we're aware that for this group of kids, 26 and 27 for 4th grade isn't the option that we want to land on.
I apologize if that came across the wrong way. I'm actually asking if you have a ton of community participation here. You have like people who are on the board at KIC. You have KIC being mentioned over here. KIC is under supported and the school relies on it heavily. And so this can be like a rallying cry to get people to participate who haven't participated in the past. I don't know what 3rd grade participation is with KIC students. I don't know if you know right now, the top of your head, but like, well, you're a KIC person. You follow up later. But my point is that the community is here right now. And so there are tons of problems. We're all talking about all the problems. Everybody sees them. We hear about them. But what do we need to solve this issue aside from a Google form that says raise your hand if you want to have your kid do it, which I think is a very logical thing to do. Like, what does the school need? And can the parents partner with KIC and be like, let's do something? Can we do a drive? Can we do whatever to try to get this extra $150,000? Like,
Can we do something more proactive to get answers on whether someone knows they're leaving the district? I know it's hard to keep something in, but is there any way? Have you ever reached out for, like, I don't know, just more proactively to get engaged?
So I meet with the registrar monthly to find out which any kids coming in or going out so that we can have an update on what our enrollments are.
Like literally the Google form.
Oh, like surveying families
Are you
coming in
staying
and
next
coming out.
year? Like, there's no guarantees in life, but.
Mhm.
Yeah, we also
choose to
look,
move in July,
we also
but-
have historical data to know about how many typically depart and how many new come in, but we had a January that was atypical, right? We got more new students in January than we had for a really long time. So we can look at what typically happens. And typically it's a few leaving and few coming to the point where they pretty much even each other out. But, we're a public school. And so if they show up on, the day before school or the day of school, and they live here and then they join us. So, and that happens too. And like Raquel said, we've hired in August, Claire Adams, one of our beloved kindergarten teachers, we hired her like 4 days before school started. And the rest of us teachers were like in her classroom, helping her get set up because she literally had 4 days. So it happens because the numbers crept up and it's like, okay, we need another section at a particular grade level. So that happens too. But we prefer not to be last minute and to be planful. And so that's the time that we're in that planning time. One part of the slide that we didn't really highlight is kind of a planning timeline. So, May 15th is the final determination on staffing. So we still have some time to figure out where we're going to land. And part of it is looking at the budget, looking at the monies that are coming in, looking at all of these other factors that we talked about tonight.
I don't know where we are with staffing, but like, let's say we could make the smaller 5 classes happen. If we have to have more staff, are we currently interviewing potential candidates?
Yeah, I don't think we're at a point where we need to interview staff, because we have some other shifts in the district that affect our overall staffing. So including Kent. So it's a district. So there are more fifth grade teachers this year than are needed next year. So there's broader shifts that happen. So we're not anticipating needing to interview for a general education class. There will be other positions potentially that are opening, but not a multiple subjects general education teacher. It doesn't look like we're going to need to do that.
Can I just clarify real quick? So the May 15th timeline, that's per the education code. We have to provide final notification for a reduction in force. So we've provided 2 letters of reduction in force. That's the March preliminary timeline that we give. And so we have to, if we anticipate that we're going to have less classes or less teachers, we have to provide those letters by that time, or we can't move forward with that. That's why it says that there, that you could still bring somebody back at the end of May, for example. It's May 30th is when the public hearing from the board, that the board hears the proposed budget, and then they consider approval at the June meeting. So those are kind of like when they approve the budget and determining moving forward.
So if someone thinks like on the 15th, you can still lock them in for the next year by the 13th.
Yeah. So so you could bring them back at any time. And we've had that situation where there was someone that was noticed the May 15th timeline, and I called them in August and said, we've got a place for you. And they were still available and they came. No, it's not ideal, for sure. So, but just, or the other thing is you take some of your internal staff that might be in an auxiliary position and you offer them an opportunity to teach a self-contained classroom. So that's the other thing you can do. So just to put that out there.
One quick question, if you go back to the slide with the 4.5 and the numbers of, So I think I heard you say that the current third grade teachers do not want to teach the rising third graders next year in a large class size.
It would be their
They would
preference
be doing
not
the same
to.
thing that they did with our class.
They did
Correct.
They did
So
5 classes and moving it into 4.
it would be helpful, like as a parent, to sort of hear some of the feedback from the teachers in terms of what they saw this year in our students. I mean, obviously, you know, kids love to melt down at home, and then I get a report card and he's like a perfect gentleman in class, which doesn't compute in my brain. But if they are saying that they don't want to do 26 again, I would be really interested to understand why, like what they saw was difficult for them being a third grade teacher of this particular cohort this year.
And, you know, I should probably back up. They haven't actually said it to me like that. I'm kind of coming from my seat as their protector, that I don't really want to put them in a position of having to do that. I think that the reason I brought on another paraprofessional around the holidays, January, I think it was because of my interactions with the third grade team, my meeting with them. You know, these are my colleagues. I've been here for 16 years. I've worked with most of them for that whole period of time. And so I knew that they were feeling overwhelmed. They were feeling stretched, right? So I wanted to support them and alleviate some of that sense of feeling overwhelmed. They haven't actually come to me and said, don't give me 26 or 27 next year, right? But that's more coming from me as their, you know, like I said, protector of, I want to set them up for success, you know, attract and retain quality staff. That retain piece, it's important, right? So you can have a challenging year. We all, as educators, sometimes have a challenging year, but I don't want to set them up for another challenging year. I think it has been a challenging year. Are they knocking on my door complaining all the time? Are they crying after school? No, right? Are there some challenges? Yes. Are there days when, you know, they're like a big, huge sigh and I go, okay, I'll take your class to music. You take a break, right? So, yeah, but it happens, you know, everywhere, right? You have those challenges. Sometimes you have a small class and that small class is really challenging. So I'm not discounting small classes by any means, right? I once taught a class of 18 kids in kindergarten. It was like you split them in half, you have 9 kids. It was like a dream, right? They were also a very, you know, nice group of kids to work with. I didn't have huge, you know, behavior issues, but it's not a guarantee, but it does typically, you know, from a teacher standpoint, alleviate some of your stress and sense of being overwhelmed with the jobs that we do.
Kind of just thinking about how you're piecing this out. You're saying 10 rising fourth graders would go to a, a 2 4 classroom. So that basically takes 10 off the total. So if there's 27 kids in the class, it goes from 27 to 25. Like, it doesn't really feel like that's kind of like offsetting it significantly for the other kids. And, it's, or 2 to 3, right? Maybe 3, but like you go from like 27 to 25 to 24, it's still, kind of larger, right? And then you're also, if you're considering it, like, my guess is in the mixed classroom, you're not going to be putting students in that are more challenging, right? So.
Well, you're not gonna not put a challenging kid. You're not gonna not put a student who has academic or behavior challenges. I'm not saying you're not gonna put a student like that in that class. But you're going to carefully, just like we do with every class, you're gonna carefully look at the mix and the balance. It's not, a class where you have to test into, and it's only the high kids, or it's only the this kids or the that kids. Still would be a heterogeneous class.
But I'm saying, is it still really offsetting it enough for the other kids that are in the?
It depends on the numbers. I mean, I was throwing out 10 and 10 because I like that number, but it could be 12 and 12. It could be 11 and 11. Those are all considerations and part of the planning process. I do think there are some advantages, especially with the first time doing it, that it'd be slightly smaller than the standalone classes, given the planning of the teacher, the planning to curriculum for 2 grade levels.
Did that go along with that? My question is about like, how, like, if you have 10 parents raising their hand, wanting their children to be involved in this, I understand that you can't just say yes, but is it really to make it that even, what's the reason for that? To make it an even balanced class, behavior, academics, is that your?
And that kind of goes against what you were just saying, with all due respect, because then you're not choosing carefully, you're just putting the kids whose parents want them to be.
No, but I didn't say that I would put, I didn't. I said that I would give you the opportunity to let me know if you had a preference or not. I didn't, and I specifically said that it wouldn't be an opt-out. It wouldn't be like, you told me you don't want to be in it, so then you're not gonna be in it. Or you told me you want to be in it, and so you are. It would be additional information that we would take into consideration in making up the class makeup.
I'm wondering, in a class of 27 kids, you have kids at different levels and kids with different, behaviors. I'm wondering, do we need to restructure that? And look at the classes carefully and look at what's causing problems with 27 kids? Is it that you have kids that are very smart and are getting bored and throwing tantrums in class? Or is it that you have kids that really are struggling and they don't know how to communicate that? And I mean, I went to school in the public system in New York, and the schools were arranged very differently than what they are here. We had different levels of learning, and I thought it worked very well. I don't remember kids misbehaving in class or creating disruption, but we were separated based on our abilities on how we did in class. And I felt like my teachers were really focused and kids could prosper. But I find that my daughter gets bored in school, and yes, she helps other kids that struggle. And that's the first thing she says when she comes home. She says, I helped so-and-so with this assignment. I said, but what did you learn? I didn't learn anything. I said, but I helped so-and-so. I said, well, that's great, but I do want you to learn something new. So I'm just wondering, in a class of 27 kids, it could work potentially, but do we need to rearrange it? We need to maybe talk to the teacher, say, well, what is it that makes it difficult to teach 27 kids? Is it that you need to, you're focusing, some kids are needing more help than others? I don't know, maybe that's something that we also need to look at.
Yeah, I think to that point, I think it's a really good point. I think, what is it that's making this class of kids so challenging? If kids are resilient, whatever you guys choose to do next year, they'll be fine. And I don't mean to generalize, but kids are resilient. They'll be fine. There'll be a shift. It'll take 2 weeks and they'll figure it out. What's happened, right? What's going on with behavior? What kind of support does this class of 105 kids need? I've heard as a mom, first of all, I've heard from teachers that say this is the toughest year of their career because of the behavior of the kids. specifically from our third grade teachers. What's going on? And what is, personally, there's parenting, there's lack of structure. There is the pendulum has swung. To your point, it's swung, and we all say this, right? It swung so hard left. Do we need to just maybe tighten things up? Can we just focus, like whatever happens logistically, classroom wise, fine, whatever. We could raise money, but it's not gonna, set the next 5 years between now and, right? What's happening? What do these kids need? What are they not getting? What are the adults that are working with them? I'm sure they're burnt out post-COVID. It has rained for 4 months. Okay, of course we are seeing it. Your kids are coming home acting nuts because they are not running. They're not moving. There's no lunch tables. There's no, right? They're not getting that whole social, emotional, running, moving their bodies, none of it. It's been 4 months, right? So what can we do? The counselor is overwhelmed, right? It's behavioral issues. So could we look at the behavioral issues instead of, it's totally feasible to work with a classroom of 27 kids.
It is.
None of that is impossible. City schools, right? I had this conversation today where they're going, my kid's at 32. All the city schools, public schools, like we are blessed with what we have. Do I want 22? I do. Don't get me wrong. Do I want you to teach?
Yeah,
or
no.
I've been there. I wish you would, But the point is, like, what do we need to do? Can we just focus on the behavioral issues and what needs to happen?
I so appreciate you, Ami,
You know?
that I do, and everything that you said, because ultimately that is the question. What do they need? What are they communicating through their behavior, And we started the year, earlier in the year, we brought on Julie Kurtz, who, I don't know if you got to go to the parent presentation, but she came to our staff and talked about trauma and stress and the brain and how we react to it and how we have to give kids tools to re-regulate themselves so that they can access the part of the brain that makes good decisions, right? You can't make good decisions if you're elevated. So that PD was very well received as a staff, so much so that we recommended her to the PTA. Some of us, Anne Marie and I, and a few others took a 6-hour course with her because the work was so relevant to not only this group of kids, but all of our kids, especially post-pandemic. We've all been through something incredibly stressful. We were literally worried about our lives and that of our children. So those are some things that we've done. We're looking at this behind the scenes. We're looking at other social emotional learning programs. We're looking at the current ones that we have. How can we use them more to fidelity? Where do we need some more work or training?
How do we hold kids accountable when they're 9,
And
10?
yeah, and what is the behavior communicating? Because behavior is a communication tool. Kids are communicating something to us through their behavior. They're communicating that they need attention. They're communicating that they don't know how to make a friend and they're frustrated. They're communicating that they're frustrated. They're communicating that they think the world is unfair. They're communicating something to us. So there aren't, so we respond based on what we're seeing. We have some work to do there. We're not alone in this. We go to principal network meetings across the county. What's on your mind? Behavior. What's on your mind? Behavior, behavior. It's like across, the board in education. So
What is that?
hence the team time, hence all of the things that we're doing, the commitment to a full-time school counselor, right? Other schools, some schools don't have that. We prioritize it. We see the importance of it. The collaboration among our team. So I think that, you know, that ultimately is the most important question and the most important work that we're doing. We also have to look at their academics, and we have to look at class size, and we have to look at all this stuff. So to the extent class size helps facilitate the social emotional piece better, right? That's where it's important, right? Because like you said, 27 is doable. You can have a really successful year with 27, with all different kinds of needs. But when there's particular social emotional needs, we need to, that's where we're working, right? That's that. And it is all those factors. It's not just school. It's not just what we're doing here. It's their whole life experience. It's how they are at home. It's how they are at sports and their extracurricular. It's all of those things. It's their temperament and their personality. And all those things come together to give us what we see here at school. So I don't have all the answers.
No, I know. I don't think that you guys aren't doing it. I know your boots on the ground. I think that, you know, part of it is back to basic stuff that just means, hang on, like, maybe we just need to tighten. But, you know, I mean, we're coddling our kids post-pandemic, and we all know that, you know, but now it's been a sec. Maybe we just need to like get back to basics.
I wonder if we should overlay, like, never really addressed different learning styles that much. And I feel like maybe if we thought about that a little bit in terms of the classrooms. To alleviate some of the stress, like some kids are gonna be more into project-based learning. Other kids might want to have more independent time. You know, can we think a little bit about what their learning styles are? Like, are they more of an observer? Do they really want to get into it with other kids? Maybe that can alleviate some of this social emotional stress because they might be in a rhythm in a classroom that supports them better. That's just something I think we could just benefit from overall. And it's tough, but I think maybe if we have a history on the core group of kids by third, fourth grade, maybe it's easier at that point to think about classes more vibrant. Super thought.
I just think all of this is achieved by having the smallest class size possible next year, you guys. Like, I look at these kids, a lot of these parents in this room have kindergartners. I have a kindergartner, and Sarah has a kindergartner. He's so excited about learning right now. He's like figured out how to read. He's starting to read. He's figured out how the classroom dynamic works and how the schedule works. And he's so excited about being at school and about really learning. And so I think about that, and I think that it was this moment that our kids went into the pandemic. And I just, you know, for those of you that don't know, I've been in a lot of the art classes helping, and our kids they're struggling more than the kindergartners are to be respectful. And I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to like, it's a little embarrassing as a parent, but it's also really concerning because I think that they lost something being in the remote classroom. And I just feel like we really owe it to them. And it's not because you guys aren't trying. I think you guys are doing an awesome job. But next year, my goal is that we get these classes as small as we can financially get them. So we can just really help them, you know, and get them back to the place that they need to be going forward. And it's not that I don't think a third, fourth grade combo could work. I think it could work, but I just think that if we have the option to have 5 classes, we should really have 5 classes for both the incoming third graders and the incoming fourth graders, because I feel like they were really impacted by the pandemic, and we owe that to them as parents, as a community, to like really, you know, try to get all of them back on track. So
For that, Maria.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm interested if you've seen, and I'd like to see the data comparing our cohort to a cohort that hasn't gone through a pandemic potentially, compared to the fourth graders who wasn't quite
maybe it's.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably, we could do a CAS comparison once they take CAS. We didn't in this district use map growth before the pandemic, so I don't have that data to compare. And I don't know how easy it would be to find Qantas and Pinell data, but I can search, I could look, there would be some data points that we potentially could do to compare. But yeah, it's, and yeah, so that's something that we could look at.
What are your peers seeing at other schools of third grade? I mean, we're hearing like this cohort in particular has had a lot of issues. Is this third grade across the country? Is it just this group, the dynamics of this group? What are you seeing? What are your peers seeing? And that not help alleviate a little bit of our stress, like it's just our kids or?
No, I think other schools are seeing third grade. There's articles written about this age group of kids and what they lost, missed out on. So it's not just unique to Bacich. A lot of other schools are having issues at kindergarten as well. First too. I mean, there's pockets, but no, I would say that it is not just unique to Bacich.
So we're kind of right in now with other third grades.
Yeah, for all the reasons that you guys identified and lived through.
So one thing about the pandemic, we all got to experience it. Our kids all got to experience it. And so as a mom too, I see a difference with my youngest daughter compared to her two older brothers and what she lost out on. So I think it is universal. And talking to my colleagues at the superintendent level, that's what their staffs are all working on, is the social emotional
And
piece.
as we look to the future, like 5th grade, 6th grade, like this is a larger class. We need to be thinking about what's gonna happen then. I mean, is this just a Band-Aid for 4th grade? You know,
It's actually not a larger class. So
No.
our current
Fourth grade is like
114.
112, 114.
Typically always 5.
The
Like,
current,
typical,
the
but-
current, fifth grade is six.
To 130. It's in the
Sixth
third,
grade.
136 or something.
Yeah, sixth grade, 6 classes worth. It ebbs and flows. I mean, there was a time here when we were upwards of 700 students and we were pretty much 5 sections, 5 classes at every grade level. And we haven't seen those numbers for a while. So our numbers have actually gotten smaller. Yeah, we even had 6, at multiple grade levels in a few years. So those numbers have gone down.
Our overall enrollments at the district is staying pretty steady because of adding in TK. If we didn't have TK, we would be seeing the dip that people are talking about across the state and across the nation in public school settings.
What's the average class size in 5th grade?
Oh,
I'm not sure I have that number, but they went to 6 sections, and so I think they might be at 25,
25 or 26.
24, 25, yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
24, 25.
Mhm.
Was this cohort having issues before? We were going to this school, was behavioral issues before pandemic as well?
They were.
Well, they were pretty young. They were in kindergarten, so nothing unusual, but just typical kindergartners learning how to do school.
Well, it's a good question, like, how were they on Zoom? I mean, I remember being like, oh my God, I remember like apologizing, at the end of class. Were we, I mean, again, I'm not sure it makes the difference. If the behaviors are what they are, we need to attend to them, right? And, things like respect and things, again, for someone who's in the field, I think over the only thing. I think it's really important to. emphasize that a lot of this comes from home, like
Mhm.
kids, I'm in our affairs all the time. Respect to your teachers,
One
to each other.
one student will derail the class, and then you have 2 or 3 more students that are then involved, right? So.
Well, I mean, what you're saying, Ami, is these students not only had a different school experience, they also had a different home and parenting experience. So, you know, and no fault of any of us, we were doing the best that we could, right? Did we use devices more than we would have? Yes. Were we, you know, stressed, and were we trying to get our own work done in one part of the house while we were like, you know, having them do something? And yeah, I mean, they experienced not just a disruption to school, but a disruption to their lives. Did they get to see their cousins as much and visit grandparents? Did they go on trips? Did they, you know, there were a lot of things for all kids, including this group. So I think it's not, you know, it's not, and then the continuation of how are we parenting now? Like, you know, are we afraid to say no because they missed out on things? Are we, you know, are we excusing them because they missed out on things? And like, so I think, you know, we have to look at those pieces too.
I think they got.
Yeah, they got
I think
iPad.
I think that was talking meeting.
They got, they were on devices more. They did. I mean, there are a lot of factors. And as a larger society, we're still unpacking it all, right? And I think we have to keep talking about it because, and we even use, I think we use the wrong terminology, you know, post-pandemic. Are we really post-pandemic? Like, I mean, we have teachers, I have teachers out with COVID, right? And we have COVID notices and.
Yes, parent has had their hand up and
Yeah, sorry.
she took it down, and then Erica, can you hear me? Sorry. I didn't know how to.
Got tired.
No, she put it up again.
There.
It was down and then she put it up again, so. She's on mute. But
I think as my oldest is in third grade, so it's like all these people talking about bringing it back. I have no back to bring it, so this is my only experience, so it's interesting to hear that perspective. But it's also like interesting because this is my first, like, I haven't been coddling her, I don't think, because of the pandemic, but maybe I have, I don't know. So it's like that like opens up more to my brain than I had considered before. I mean, I know socially and emotionally, I know that they've missed out on things, like just common sense of missing out on your life in public, but we all have, and I think not like next year isn't gonna solve that. Fifth grade isn't gonna solve that. This is gonna be a very long, drawn out process that they're gonna have to contend with for a very long time, as are we. I mean, we're still.
Absolutely. And our kids experienced it differently, right? We had kids who were home alone as young as, you know, third grade because parents had to work and they were on Zoom, you know, and home by themselves, compared to other students who had a parent literally sitting next to them, able to help them one-on-one with the work all day long, right? So different experiences. The student who had the parent one-on-one coming back into a classroom where there's one adult to 20 some odd, right? Their reaction to that is really different from the kid who is home alone and navigating it by themselves, right? So, so there aren't universals. I think there are some universals in terms of, yeah, they all had to go home at a time when they shouldn't have had to go home,
But have faith that they will, like, with the proper structure and consistency,
Mhm,
they will
mhm,
come back
mhm.
to, you know, like, they will have faith.
Yeah, I
Your
feel
third
like
grader,
it's
like,
pointing at
saying
one
like,
way.
that just because we happen to have older kids or have been through this, it doesn't, like, it just holds true. Like, if we at home and at school run a steady line,
Mhm.
just study, so that they know what's coming, they know, you know, what to expect from their teachers, from their art class, from their classroom, at their desks, at home. Structure and consistency, they will, like, it will, you know, they'll level out and they'll figure it out, but we have to be
And
willing to do
we
what's
have
right.
some third graders who are thriving, you know, I mean, they're thriving in a lot of ways. They're making academic growth, they have new friends, they're, you know, they're playing baseball now, it's spring. I mean, there's a lot to celebrate too. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. So,
What can we do this trimester? Because I do feel like maybe we are coming to a point where we're really thinking we have the time, maybe a little bit of luxury to strategize now. There's been a lot of pressure on it. It's almost felt that way, at least in our household, with like gotta catch up with core five, we gotta like we were catching up and maybe now we're able to, the scores have showed the community move forward and the school is not over.
There's a whole trimester left.
Is
The
there
third
anything
of,
that we
the
can
third
do
of.
now to address the anxiety that's causing behavior issues or, I don't know.
Well, what I'd want to say is, Maria, we had a parent principal chat last Monday. Was it a week ago today? And from the feedback, what parents were asking was some of the common language. And just kind of knowing what does team time mean? What does win time mean? Right. So we talk about it because we're in conversations all the time, but as a parent, you don't like, I don't even know what win stands for. Right. So maybe I think one of the things that Maria is trying to do is put some more of that information out there so that there's some common language going back to what was said earlier about knowing what's happening between the school and home. And when you're at it helps with the conversation other than getting in the car and saying, so how was your day? Great. Okay. So, but what does great mean? It means great. Right. So that's all they say. So I think that's something we can do as a system is how can we get that information out there to parents so that you have that tool to be able to engage in a conversation with your child so you know more about what's happening in the school. And then there's this shared common language. I think that would be.
And I know
super
that,
helpful.
my newsletter entry in the district newsletter on Monday isn't like, you're not like waiting for it at 5 o'clock every Monday or whenever it comes, but I do encourage you to read it because it's intentional, like the things that I've shared in there. There's a little blurb tonight, whenever it probably came out while we were in here, that highlighted a particular team time lesson for that exact feedback of, can we have common language? So it was a lesson about putting a wrinkle in your heart. And when someone says something mean to you, it puts a wrinkle in your heart. And you can smooth it out, but it's always still going to be there, right? Like, and so the kids worked with a piece of paper heart. They folded it, right? And then, okay, now you have to try to unfold it and get rid of the wrinkle. Like, well, that wrinkle is that mean thing that you said. So it might have faded a little bit, but it's still there. So we gave kids language, like if someone says something hurtful, you can say, ouch, you wrinkled my heart, or ouch, don't wrinkle my heart. So I shared that little blurb with parents. So maybe this is something that you can say. Maybe when, the older sibling says something mean to the younger sibling in your home, you can say, hey, you're wrinkling his heart. Like, that doesn't feel kind, right? And you can only do so much to repair it. It's kind of still there. And I, as a classroom teacher, would tell kids all the time, my strongest memory from elementary school was when a kid said something really mean to me in 5th grade. I'm like, how old am I? And that is that's a really strong memory to me. And it goes to that piece. And so I would tell them, like, you don't want to be that memory for somebody. I remember his name. I know what he looks like, right? Like, you don't want to be that memory for somebody. So that kind of common language, I think I'm intentionally, I took that feedback, so I can share those little blurbs, but you have to read them.
We get plenty of.
Yeah,
I think
yeah, and the teacher newsletters as well. And so there was some feedback around like, well, what's happening at this win time? We keep hearing about win time. And so, trying to get a little bit more detail about what is happening in your child's classroom for win time. So, that feedback is really helpful. I like these forums, even though I'm like on the hot seat, like I get feedback, right? And so it helps me to do my job better, right? Because you guys are a partnership. Ultimately, I'm responsible for improving student outcomes, right? But how do I do that? Well, I have to engage with you as well. And so hearing your feedback helps me do that piece. So I really like the feedback, even if it's negative, as long as it's constructive, it's helpful. So yeah, we've kept you really, really long. So thank you guys for being here, and know that my door is open. Well, it might be closed sometimes, but you can always email me, reach out to Lynn if you want to talk or chat. So thank you guys for being here. Yeah.